Welcome back to Centerpoint. As you saw from Poland, there are children everywhere, some with mothers, a few with fathers, some with neither, and infants now up for adoption.
I don't worry about me, but something I worry about my family, about my mom and dad. We just hope this war over as soon as possible, and we can return to Kiev and help to rebuild it.
Please stop war. Anything method, please stop war.
Needed to separate children from father, separate us.
Seeing those beautiful little faces certainly makes us all feel their pain. And you wonder, what can we do? What would you tell them to try to guide them through the horror of war? What about the children here at home in America who are watching a month's worth of war on their TV sets, on their cell phones? Our Centerpoint reporter, Blynda Lane, has an expert on that subject. Blynda?
For many people around the world, some of those images of the children are very difficult to see. Clinging to their mothers, dressed to stay warm, peering out from behind a scarf, eyes wide open. They are the often lost victims of war. And outside the region, parents from all over are trying to figure out how to speak with their own children about what they are seeing and hearing from the war zone. To help us figure out the best way to handle our young, we're joined by Darcy Walker Krause. Darcy, welcome back to TBN. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Blynda.
To start off, my first question is twofold. Thinking about these images that we've just seen, how would you, when talking to children, make sense of this hatred and madness that they would also maybe be seeing on their television screens? And then secondly, what would you say to the adults as well who are probably watching this all the time?
It's so hard, Blynda. You know, obviously, this is hard for many of us to make sense of. So when our children look at us and ask us questions, it's very hard. I think that one of the things I would advise is, you know, obviously when developmentally appropriate, but to share what we know about it, to share why this is happening, to acknowledge that there are sometimes evil things that happen in this world, there are atrocities that happen, and that this is one of those. And to just really validate that this isn't here, this is not close by, you know, that we are safe here. But, you know, just trying to explain what's happening in the most developmentally appropriate way you can is one of the best ways to kind of help your children. And then I think for adults, you know, we are all so tired and it has been a really hard time. We're coming out of COVID, out of a pandemic. You know, I actually was thinking history guides things. You know, the first pandemic, the flu pandemic, was right after World War I. And I've been thinking about that recently because I'm sure that people were tired and grieving and maybe had lost loved ones and then went straight into the pandemic. So we can look at history and see that this has happened before, but it doesn't make it easier. And I think that really for adults, the biggest thing we can do right now is just take care of ourselves, make sure we're accessing ways to kind of deal with our own anxieties, whatever those are for you. It could be exercise, it could be talking to your religious leaders, it could be meditation or any sort of mind-body practice that you find helps you cope with other kinds of anxiety. But I really think that the best thing for adults, both personally and for their children, is really to take care of yourselves and make sure that we're dealing with our own anxieties the way that we need to.
That's an interesting thought. Do you feel like children can pick up on the parents' anxieties and fears that they're carrying? Do they see that and sense that in the home?
Absolutely. I think that our kids look to us for cues on every emotion or thing that they see in the world, or I even see kids sometimes in the conversation that's happening, going back and forth, watching how their parent or caregiver is reacting. And so I think that they're definitely watching us. They're looking to see how are my my dad, how are they dealing with this? How are they responding to this? And it's really important that that we show them healthy ways to cope with those anxieties. But I also think that sometimes it also is making sure that maybe not to talk about the anxious things in front of them. I know that my husband and I, sometimes there are things that we talk about after the kids are asleep, if it's something that upset us that we saw about the war in Ukraine. And so we try to kind of gauge what we're talking about in front of the kids. And I think that that's also a really helpful tool, just to maybe take some time separately from the kids if you're dealing with issues around it.
How does a parent judge a child's age or maturity level? How do they know what is too much for that particular child?
It really depends on every child. But I will say that probably under the age of 8, maybe 9, 10, depending on the maturity level of your child, I would watch what level of detail I would go into with those kids. So really I'm thinking elementary school age. Really monitoring what you're sharing. Don't be too detailed necessarily, but give factual information. I'd say for 10, probably 11 and older, so your middle schoolers and high schoolers, you can be a little bit more honest. You can share a little bit more. Once again, though, if you're really, really stressed, if you're really, really anxious, I do believe that those are things to maybe take a minute before showing those to your child, because they will pick up on whatever you're feeling, and sometimes they take that on themselves as well.
So let me ask, I know sometimes the images we're seeing are those of people helping, providing food and water, lots of, like our Samaritan's Purse out there on the field. How does that help a child's psyche when they see that? Does it help them feel less anxious knowing that those children are being helped? And then also, what can we tell them that they could be doing that might help them feel less anxious because they're actually doing something to help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that seeing these good acts, like you referenced, Blynda, that shows humanity in the face of atrocity. And I think that that really can help balance out and show that there is hope, that there will be hope even after this is over, that there are people who care, people who are doing good things. And I believe that kids and families should get involved. I mean, it's a really wonderful way to feel that you have a sense of purpose and that we can't do anything. We can't end this war, right? But we can help people. We can run fundraisers, do a bake sale, and send it to a verified, like a group like Samaritan's Purse or other Ukrainian organizations that are raising funds. You can do little things, can make us feel better and make us realize that there will be hope and that we can help in the ways that we're able to.
So moving to the children of Ukraine, and we know we've seen the images, and so many of these mothers are taking their children out, trying to get to Poland. They're standing in the freezing cold temperatures, and it's just heartbreaking. And we know, when I spoke to you recently before, that you were telling me some of the effects on the children can last 5, 10, 15 years. And we know we just saw such a devastating story about a 9-year-old child who was making animal noises. It's just heartbreaking when you hear those stories. What's the strategy that we want to take to validate their concerns as they live in this nightmare?
The best thing to do is really for us to, really for those families to find community, to stay with their community. Fortunately, this is not an isolated occurrence for one person, so that I think that the families and the children can come together. But what they're experiencing is absolutely trauma, and the kids have no structure. They don't have their foundation underneath them. Their fears about their needs being met. They're literally in fear, and we see the kids, they look scared and traumatized. So really making sure the community is together, having groups, having like kind of psychosocial groups about just talking about what people are experiencing, making it okay to talk about being scared or whatever emotions the kids are feeling, and validating those emotions. And, longer term, some kids and families will need longer term interventions. And that's something that we will see down the line. This won't be a finite thing for us and for those families, unfortunately. And it will have a long-term impact both physically and emotionally. So that's something that we can do the groundwork now, though. We can have make sure their needs are being met, make sure that they have caring places where they can talk about how they're feeling, validating them, any emotions that they are feeling, and then really putting into place longer term some interventions that some kids and families will need.
Darcy, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.